Hi, my name is Dana Arnett, co-host of Wicked Marketing, along with my partner, Carlos Sabatini. You can find more information about us and our business on LinkedIn, or if you have any questions, email us at info@wickedbionic.com. Subscribe to Wicked Marketing on Apple Podcasts and write an awesome review for us. We're also on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Google Play. Thanks for listening.
Hi, I'm Dana.
And I'm Carlos, and welcome to our new series that we are launching today with an incredible special guest. The series is called Marketing Luminaries, and what we're doing is we're bringing in people from the industry that have massive experiences, that are very knowledgeable in their field, and people that we just admire. And today we have a very special guest.
We do. We're so fortunate. I want to introduce everybody, to our listeners, to Nicole Sabatini. Nicole is a dear friend of ours and a colleague of Carlos's for many years. She is the Vice President of B2B Marketing at Hulu. And welcome, Nicole.
Welcome. Thanks for having me. Thanks for that introduction.
Yeah.
So glad to have you here.
We're very excited to have Nicole. And what we're trying to do with this series is really explore what it is about marketing that makes people get into it, how it drives their passions, and what's exciting and different, because people tend to see marketing sort of as just putting a message out there, right? But there's so much more that goes into it. And I think what's great about starting up with Nicole is not only that she has massive experience in marketing and is a brilliant executive who I've had the pleasure of working for and with in my past, but she does something that is very unique, which is B2B marketing, or that's what she leads right now in her career. So Nicole, you want to tell us a little bit about just a quick background on you and B2B marketing, so that our listeners know who we're talking to and what we're talking about. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Sure, would be happy to. So I guess I'll just kind of start a little bit, just knowing what the focus of this is, a little bit about how I got to where I got, and then within that, absolutely shed a little bit more light into kind of this B2B business side of marketing. Great. So as a kid growing up, I studied dance. Like, that was kind of one of my big areas of passion and focus. I think, my parents, having been the daughter of two really amazing athletes, I think they were a little surprised that they created two dancers, but they went with it. And so growing up, I loved performing and entertaining. Now, I also have the personality, and I'm a realist, and knew that was going to be a harder life for me. So, by the way, I give everybody so much credit that takes the chance and actually goes for it. But so I knew that I wanted to be a part of entertaining people in my career, even if that meant for me that it had to be more on the business side. So my first job out of college was in media buying. It was in buying at the time for TV and radio in Philadelphia, this great agency, Harmelin Media, which continues to grow, that was started by a wonderful woman, Joanne Harmelin. And what that did was it helped me better understand the business of TV, and more kind of specifically marketing and advertising. So when it came time for me to move to New York City, which essentially meant saved up enough money to rent my first small apartment with two friends, I was fortunate to get my foot in the door through a friend at the Cartoon Network. And it was as a promotions marketing coordinator. And so I was, of course, over the moon when I got this job. And what was very clear for me immediately was how lucky I was to have gotten into TV marketing. But what wasn't immediately clear until I got more into the job was that I really kind of stumbled upon this area of marketing that I had no idea existed, and would become a big passion of mine, and one to build my career around. So at that job, it was called promotions marketing. So it's called many things depending on where you work. But whether you refer to it as integrated marketing, sales marketing, business or B2B marketing, the idea of marketing to businesses about the impact of an entertainment brand, and then how to build partnerships around that to benefit both the advertiser and the viewer or the consumer. And that's the really important part. And that was the space that, again, I just kind of stumbled upon in that first job at the Cartoon Network. And from there have worked at a number of, multiple cable TV networks until 4 years ago, where I joined Hulu. And so now this kind of perfect intersection of entertainment and technology.
Oh my God, what a background.
Cartoon. I know, right? That sounds so
fantastic.
Exciting.
That's great, Nicole.
So tell us a little bit, Nicole, I think this is super exciting. And there's a lot of people that understand that listen to us and understand kind of what the B2B marketing piece of it is. But tell us sort of what a day-to-day within that industry entails. Like, what are the types of relationships that you have to build? What do those relationships represent for the company and for you? Like, what is it that's exciting, and what achievements do you get to do within that field that you connect with?
Yeah, I think for me, like, what I love so much about this space is really being able to leverage the left and the right side of the brain purely and truly, right? In that there is such a creative component to it. There is a huge storytelling component to it, creating narratives that are clear and engaging to an advertiser, somebody you're presenting to, somebody that you're in front of at a conference. Like, building that narrative in a way that is interesting is incredibly creative, while also kind of using the other part of the brain and having to, and the great thing about the B2B marketing side of the business is, at a very early stage in your career, you really have to understand the business and revenue and the implication of revenue, right, and the way to balance revenue with brand and revenue with what's good and best for your consumer, your viewer. And so that's kind of that's that area that, again, I stumbled upon, that I was like, this is a really interesting space that I get super excited about. And my day to day, at the end of the day in B2B marketing, whether it be for entertainment or not, you're a marketer. I lead a marketing team. And so whether the end consumer is a subscriber, a viewer, or an advertiser, the same method applies. For me, very specifically, being in B2B marketing in this area, a big focus of what we do is drive impact at some of the larger industry events, right? Because they're the events that are the must-attend events that the advertising marketplace is making sure to show up, to get educated, to learn, to network. So things like CES and, of course, the New Fronts and the Upfronts, Cannes Lions, Advertising Week, ANAs, IAB, multiple events that they do throughout the year. So these are industry tentpole events that we know our audience will be. And so as a B2B marketer in this space, that's a big part of what you focus on, and really thinking about what is the right message? How does that message evolve throughout the year at these various events? How do you lean in to something a little bit more or less, depending on what the goal of the event is? So CES, how do you lean a little bit more into technology? Cannes Lions, how do you lean a little bit more into creativity? So kind of the narrative needs to build and flow a little bit, depending. And then how do you supplement and amplify all of those events with other things so that you have an always on message? And the way I always look at it is, our best asset, of course, in what we do is our sales teams. They are the ones that every day keep that passion up to talk about your platform, your product, and to educate advertisers. But if we're doing our jobs right as B2B marketers, they're going into those meetings where there's already a level of awareness from the things that we're working on a day-to-day basis. And then the other thing I would mention is, it is so important, and I think when done best, that B2B marketers are incredibly connected to the brand marketers wherever you are. So in my case, it's the Hulu brand team, because it really does need to be an extension of the brand. We're fortunate in this space that our advertisers are also our consumers, right? The majority of the marketers and advertisers that we talk to are consumers of Hulu. And so there needs to be a consistency in that brand message.
From what I'm hearing you say, what comes to mind that I think is super unique about your type of marketing is that you really have sort of this three-pronged system, right? Where you have to understand and create and be passionate about the messaging from the corporate side, right? What Hulu's putting out there, knowing the content, and then knowing and sort of analyzing the advertiser and figuring out what type of content will work with what advertiser and how do you position it in a way that it makes sense to for the advertiser to tie their brand onto this type of content and this type of presence, right? And then you also have to think about the consumer and how is that going to be received by the consumer? Is it going to make sense? Is this going to work together? How do I protect both the advertiser and my brand in order for me to be effective at delivering it? So it's a lot of creativity and a lot of kind of threading that storyline together, kind of like how you were mentioning before, right? You have to keep your mind on those three elements in order to be successful.
Absolutely. And I think, I've been very fortunate to work at brands where they've put the consumer and viewer first, whether that be when I was at Nickelodeon or Bravo or now Hulu. And so that's such a key element to it, because ultimately the advertiser will benefit the most if whatever you're creating together is something that's going to resonate with the viewers and really draw that connection. And so I think the brands that stay true to that the most are the ones that benefit not only the viewer, but then ultimately the advertiser. So I've been fortunate in the brands that I've been a part of.
Are there any things that you would say if some of our listeners are advertisers, right? And they're looking at not only Hulu, but just partnering overall with brands. Are there things that just come to mind for you that they should be on the lookout for, or any specific, doesn't have to be specific, but tactics that you think about when you place yourself from the advertiser perspective and making those decisions?
Yeah, I mean, something that I think a lot about just being in the streaming space, which, whether I was literally working at a streamer or not, I just think we can't in this time not think about the streaming space. And so we talk a lot about how it feels very similar to when social was becoming, obviously as big as it is now. But I remember, because I did take about 5 years of my career. That's when I had the amazing pleasure of meeting Carlos. And so I worked at a couple of networks where I was doing more of a broad marketing role. And so consumer marketing and launching shows and things of that nature. And I remember that moment where everybody was like, okay, I get it. You can't just put your 30-second TV spot on Facebook or on this platform and think that it's going to perform the same way. That there was that moment that you felt as a marketer where everything changed. And I think there's still such an amazing opportunity to do that in streaming. And again, that has nothing to do with me working at a streaming platform. It's just that, it's just so exciting being in this industry.
Definitely in the right place.
Yeah. And just being passionate about how marketers just continue to have new ways to get their message across. And I do think streaming opens up a lot of possibilities. So my advice, just to kind of go back to my thought, would be just to really think about that and embrace it. Again, the way that we all did with social, where we were like, okay, we need an actual strategy for this space, both overall strategy as well as kind of a creative strategy and creative approach. And I think that's where it will just continue to get more and more exciting.
And I think just listening to that, one of the things that I always admired the most about you was, and I still do, but in your leadership role, having come from this sort of integrated marketing background, you were always that person that was open to listening to different views, to being creative about, okay, let me absorb this information first and then ask questions and become engaged before you put out a decision on which direction you wanted us to take. And I always love that, because I feel like there's so many people in the industry that have been in this and every industry, right? We run into this all the time, that sort of stay stuck in how marketing was done before, like a very linear. They either come from print or they come from the old TV days, and they're still not open to that transition. I'm not going to mention brands, but I know that you and I went head on with one of our brands, right? Trying to get people to shift that mentality and understand at that time that digital social space had completely changed the way that you absorbed your messaging. Like, Dana and I recently discussed this. There's an article that came out nowadays where it talked about the attention span of humans being the same attention span of a goldfish, or actually less than the attention span of a goldfish.
Which people can't even conceptually understand, right? None of us do that.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I really, again, loved about you. And I think it's one of those things that people can learn from working for people like you, that you don't always have the answers in marketing, right? Just because you have a world of experience, it doesn't mean that you have the answers. And it's okay still to ask questions and understand something new and create something new in your mind, and build up on your experience versus just trying to push it through. And I think that that's super unique.
Carlos, I just have to say, because it came to my mind when you were talking, you described Nicole, I think, so perfectly, because we didn't have a relationship before. And when we worked together, before we started our company, rebranding Pop TV, I would because I came from television and production. And so I would sit in the egos and the jockeying. And you were the first executive that I sat down at that table with, Carlos. I'll never forget it, with your team. And you were just so casual and so easy about it, and so open, exactly what Carlos said, to ideas. So my guess is as a leader, you're that way at Hulu. Am I correct? Is it pretty much a team effort there?
It is. Yeah. And thank you. I think a big part of it, like in hearing some of your observations, and Carlos, you said it in the beginning of what you were just talking about. I do think, having grown up in this career or in this industry on more of that sales marketing side, I do think that helps, absolutely, because you are always listening to multiple voices in the conversation when you're in that type of role, because there's so many different people who have a point of view, an important point of view, and a required point of view of how you're going to move forward with a partner. So first and foremost, of course, the partner, but the viewer, as we talked about, the consumer, the brand marketing team, and the creative team, and all of the people that kind of come together to make these programs as impactful as they need to be. And so I do think, starting early on in this space, you are trained immediately that you have to listen to all of those different voices and not react immediately, because you have to take all of that input and then be able to help move the project forward in keeping all of those different points of views in mind. Now, I think every part of any business, you've got to listen to a lot of points of views, but that is something very specific in the world of integrated marketing that I do think helps as you kind of expand into other parts of marketing. And then the other thing that I would say, that I talk to people that I mentor, talk about career growth, it's that leans into what you guys were talking about, just staying ahead of where things are going, right? And so if you do that as a team, as an individual, I think, you're ultimately going to benefit. Like, I'm probably putting dates that I don't want to in front of my career, but I remember when mobile was just starting, right?
Yep.
And so a few of us raised our hand to say, can we be part of the mobile working group and learn about this space that we knew would eventually become just integral in everything that we did, but how to really stay ahead of where things are going in whatever way you can, whether it's an actual role that you take or going to conferences and things to better educate yourself around them, doing informationals with people. But the more you can think broadly about where things are moving and where consumers are shifting to in all that you do, I think makes it that much more impactful.
I love that. I love that because I think a lot of people go to their learning resources with this mindset of, I just need to learn this, or I have to do this for my job, versus if you look at it more as staying abreast of what's happening, learning new techniques and doing new things, right? Instead of sort of like, I have to. It's that thought process of being the one that raises the hand, right? That says, I want to be the one that knows about this. It sort of keeps your career exciting. It keeps you engaged.
Are examples of that. Both of you, because Carlos is the thinking 5 years ahead, and now hearing you, Nicole. And I think that not everybody are those forward thinkers that have that vision, but because I think why it's inspiring what you're saying is then the people that aren't the visionaries, but the learners, the ones that get to know what's going on. They might not see what's going to happen, but staying on the forefront by reading and participating in things that are more progressive. I think those people then are the great people on your team that are solid,
Well, and I think it's also a way to people tend to get bored with their careers. Sure. It's a way to eliminate that boredom and sort of continue to be excited about your career. So
which is important. And by the way, Carlos always knew what was going to happen 5 years later.
He tells me that often.
One thing that stuck with me from just working with Nicole was she had, before she came to the side of NBC that I was on, because she was already on NBC side, but I came from the Comcast side of the family. She already had a fame or the gossip around when she was coming, the notoriety. That's the best word for it, right? And I remember when I first spoke to Salam Coleman, that was the president of Style, about my interest in switching over and what I had heard about Nicole. One of the things that I had heard about you was how you put together these incredible events for people that were just the most structured, well put together presentations that were like the most meticulous, that it would probably take me a year to get a presentation done with Nicole, that the level of care and dedication, and hopefully you're not spending as many hours nowadays that you're a mom as you were back then, but to the level of dedication that you've had and that I saw. I remember it's probably one of the biggest nightmares in my freaking experience ever, when we were relaunching the look and feel of the Style Network. I had never been in an experience where it was such a creative process that things came in so late that we were trying with our developers to catch up. And it was my first year as VP. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to meet this deadline. And Nicole stayed up. I remember both Nicole and Salam stayed up with me all through the night, coming in, just checking in. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't angry. She wasn't anything but supportive.
Wow.
Throughout the entire night of that launch, coming in and checking in on me. How's the team doing? Do you guys need anything? Can we order food?
Do you remember that, Nicole?
I still remember it. I never felt so helpless in my life because I couldn't help. they were, coding and getting a site off the ground. And I knew I wanted to be there and support wherever I could. So yes, they were, I remember it vividly, in a conference room down the hall from my office.
Yeah.
And you guys really pulled an all-nighter. I did go home and sleep a couple of hours and then came back because we all then celebrated the launch of the relaunch work.
Yeah.
But, I would stay in my office for a little bit and then be like, I want to go let them know I'm still here if they need anything, but I also don't want to be that annoying person that really can't help.
So
but
cool.
But I remember.
But everyone in the team remembers that. And I think part of what I am very proud of that team in particular is, to this day, a few members of that team, everyone that I talk to still remembers being part of that team and loves that part of their career. But a few members of that team still work with us nowadays. Kathy Fazio, who's our creative director, Edgar Castañedo, he's also working with our team. I hear from Kearney, like all these people that were part of that team still remember that experience, not that night necessarily, right? But the experience of working in that team as pivotal to their career and as the best leadership that they've had in their career. So I think
it's such a beautiful thing to hear. First of all, it actually choked me up for a second because I have had a few of those experiences, but when I was much younger, I don't see that stuff happening as much. And I think you gave some great ideas about leadership, which I think a lot of the people that listen to us might be newer business owners as well, and that really understanding how to really be there for your team. So thank you for sharing that, as well as all of your immense marketing experience. We're just so happy, Nicole, to be, colleagues and friends and, be able to have you here today.
Yeah,
absolutely. I'm so excited you guys are doing this podcast. It's fantastic. And it's fun to listen to and really informative, and I'm glad I could be a part of it.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you, Nicole.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Thank you for listening today. Don't forget to subscribe to and share Wicked Marketing on Apple Podcasts and write an awesome review for us. We are also on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Google Play. See you next time.